It all started with a small thing. It happened on a Friday afternoon. My 6-year-old daughter Evie, who was in first grade, got a ride after school from the mother of one of her school friends. Since they were passing through anyway, she called me and asked if I could take Evie home with me, since they lived nearby. I said yes. Instead of slowing down, she just pulled the car over to the curb to let my daughter out. Evie, who had been waiting impatiently for me, got out of the car and ran across the street to our driveway. Just as she had been trained to do, she stepped out from behind the car. She was hit by a driver going the opposite direction. She was so excited she forgot to look both ways. I immediately called 911. Within minutes, both the ambulance and the police arrived. My wife of 7 years was in a nursing home and working her regular shift. Because nursing home rules require all cell phones to be locked in a designated locker during work hours. I called them on the way to the hospital to ask them to tell me what was going on with my wife. That's when I learned that due to an unexpected slowdown at the nursing home, all full-time employees had been asked to use some of their accumulated permanent time off to save some from being laid off. Today, my wife decided to use some of her time. A small problem was that when she left for work in the morning, she wore her nurse's uniform. It was just a small thing, but it didn't add up. I didn't realize she had the day off. If she was going to use accumulated time off, she usually discussed it with me first. I wondered if she had taken some private work elsewhere to help someone in a tight spot. The only thing I was sure of was that the receptionist had deliberately fed me bullshit. It was just a small thing, but it stuck in my mind. I called her cell phone, but the answering machine picked up. It was weird because since she wasn't working, she usually answered. Something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. It was just a small thing, but it bothered me. I left a message telling her in detail what was going on. I had gotten the paperwork for my daughter. I still hadn't heard from Emma. The ER doctor sent her for x-rays and an MRI because she was still not recovering. They were afraid something might have caused her to slip into a coma. I was starting to get worried. Finally, about an hour after she usually left work, my wife showed up. As I hugged her, I could smell the odor of fresh soap coming from her body. This was the odor I usually found on her right after showering. I immediately realized something was going on, but I didn't know what. But it was just a small thing. The problem was that there were too many of them. Now I knew something was going on, but I didn't know what. I asked Emma if the receptionist had given you my message. She replied as soon as she had the chance. I was busy with a patient who needed to be transferred to St. Francis, and you were here in the southeast. I knew she was lying, but I let it pass. This wasn't the time or the place. 2 women had lied to me today. I knew I had to find out why. What started out as a normal day led to lies and a few little things between us that didn't add up. The only thing I knew for sure was that my wife wasn't acting like her usual self. We were just finishing up the tests when the apple of my eye started to come around. I'm glad that as a father I was there for her. The doctors decided it would be best to keep her overnight for observation since she had been out for so long. Around 10 p.m., when she fell asleep, we headed home, stopping at the Taco Bell cafe on the way. After eating and drinking a cold beer, we headed to bed. That Saturday, our little angel was allowed to come home. We were lucky that there were no serious injuries. When we got to the hospital, our family doctor was already examining her. I was impressed because Dr. Ronald Foster seemed to take his job seriously. Before he left, he told us to call the office to schedule a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks. He explained that sometimes problems related to the accident can manifest afterward. Without follow-up, one might not be aware of them. According to him, it is best to be careful in these situations while they are so young. When we got home and settled in, I asked Emma again how her Friday had been. The answer didn't satisfy me. She usually told me if something funny happened or if a new transfer came in from the hospital. Those little bits of normal communication and information were missing. It was just little things, but now those little things were adding up to a pattern. Whatever my wife was doing on Friday, it was clear that she didn't want me to know about it. I began to ask myself the question, why? It made me look back over the past few weeks to see if I had done something that had pissed her off. Emma, if she felt she was being treated unfairly, could hold a grudge for weeks. Emma and I were sweethearts throughout middle school. From the moment I met her for the first time in junior high, no one else existed for me. Although we broke up 3 or 4 times, we always ended up together in the end. Emma had a bad habit. When something caught her attention, she would start looking for it to see what it was that attracted her. At times like that, we'd break up. I just thought it was all part of growing up. Surely this is a stage she will grow out of. Each of these breakups was because she was interested in someone or something else. I was a member of the Jackson High School soccer team. She was a cheerleader. We were both very popular students. Everyone thought we should be together, but we broke up our senior year of high school because I saw that we weren't going anywhere. After graduation, I joined the fire department working my way up the career ladder. She got her LPN certification and started working towards becoming a registered nurse. It was the fact that I was injured while fighting a fire that was the reason we got back together. 6 months later, we were married. Our daughter was 2 years old when Emma became a registered nurse. Emma had shoulder-length black hair, blue eyes, and a very attractive figure. Everyone who knew her loved her for bringing joy to people. What puzzled me was that in our years of marriage, we never had any major conflicts or problems. A few months ago, we thought about expanding our family. On Sunday, we were invited with our daughter to an afternoon barbecue. It was an outdoor party around the pool hosted by one of her coworkers. We prepared by wearing bathing suits under our regular clothes. We were all instructed to bring something with us. On the way, I stopped at the grocery store to pick up the food we had decided to take with us. We brought enough smoked meats and buns for about 16 people. These were the premium franks that I always boiled before putting on the grill. They were made in a natural casing, and the boiling gave them a richness and bulkiness that was hidden when grilled out of the package. Instead of being dry, they became moist when grilled, and you could smell the smoke flavor in every bite. I discovered them by accident, and now only ate them. I called them smoked because that was the flavor that was so strong. It turned out that the way I cooked them made them a hit. I ended up making it so we always had more meat than bread. That Sunday, no one paid any attention to me as I stood in the kitchen at the stove and cooked the franks in salted water. I watched them until they puffed up, which didn't take long. Once they reached that state, draining the water, I dried them before sending them to the grill. My wife Emma was talking to our host Oliva, standing at the patio door. Oliva was the head of the human resources department where they worked. They were both looking toward the pool, where our daughter and her son were playing with a few other people. I didn't pay attention to what they were saying to each other until the very end. What I heard in that moment hurt me deeply. It shook me deeply to the core. It was their conversation that made it perfectly clear to me what was going on. Dr. Ronald Foster, an insanely popular single physician, used to come in every Friday afternoon to check on his patients and residents, Oliva said. Now he only shows up on Fridays when you have time. It makes some of us wonder if there is something going on between you two. If so, what should I be aware of? No, not really, my wife replied, while looking more than flushed, as if she really didn't want to discuss the matter. I knew that such a look usually meant she had been caught doing something she didn't want to explain. I now knew of 2 people whose normal Friday night routine had suddenly changed. I also knew that Emma had a very good reason why she didn't want the truth to come out. She was keeping something very secret, and it wasn't normal for her. We're just professional friends. Emma tried unsuccessfully to explain to Olive. He likes the detailed reports I send him on the behavior of his Alzheimer's patient. He says it makes his medical care easier. Well, that's not what they talk about in the hallways, Oliva said. Whatever's going on between you two, it better be kept quiet when you're at work, or the rumors about you two will only get worse. Nah, I'll be sure to tell him that the next time I see him. I have another doctor's appointment scheduled for next week, said Emma. I think I'd better go check on Evie. I watched Emma walk away to check on our daughter who was in the pool. The words came off my lips. Son of a bitch, she's lying. She doesn't have a doctor's appointment next week. Oliva heard me and turned around, seeing the shock on my face. Her face turned white because she realized, as I did in that moment, that there was definitely something going on here, and that I didn't know anything about it until today. You heard us, Damon, didn't you? Olive said. I only nodded my head. You think there's something going on between them, don't you? There have been a few little things over the past few days that just didn't add up. Now that I've just seen and heard, it's a very different picture. It was clear from the look on her face that she was hiding something she didn't want anyone to know about. It made me look at things differently. Can you please tell me how long Emma has been taking every other Friday off? Said I. For the last 3 months. She suggested this arrangement herself since she works a lot of extra hours. According to her, most of her overtime goes to extra taxes. She takes the day off to cut down on overtime hours and keep a regular day off for family matters. Oliva explained. We in HR like it because in the long run, it saves the corporation money and the part-timer gets more hours. Another question. How close are Emma and the receptionist who answers the phone? Best friends. Why? Replied Oliva. When I called because of Evie's accident on Friday, the receptionist told me that Emma was taking cumulative permanent time off because work was going so slowly that management had asked to make everyone part-time to prevent part-time employees from being laid off. You've been lied to. We are working at full capacity. We don't have room for others. What are you going to do? Said Oliva, pouring me a very strong drink. Emma is definitely hiding something. Her best friend seems to be helping her, and apparently has been doing so for some time now. I really hope what I'm suspecting right now isn't true, I said. Dr. Foster is our family doctor. If what my intuition tells me is true, I'll ruin his career, divorce his wife, and get sole custody of our daughter. Judging by the gossip, you're not the only one who thinks something else is going on, Oliva said. The nurses she works with think they're too friendly with each other for it to be anything more than a professional relationship. They seem to spend too much time in the patient's room when the door to the unit is closed. If I find out anything else, I'll let you know. Please let me know. As a firefighter, we always say that where there's smoke, there's fire. Perhaps this is nothing more than a mutual attraction taken too far. Either way, I'm going to find out, said I, wiping away the smoke. Nice try, but I don't think it's going to work, Oliva said. I've been there, and when our intuition tells us something, it usually turns out to be right. At that moment, I began to believe that I was observing the same pattern of behavior in Emma that I had seen in high school. If true, it meant only one thing. Emma's eyes had found someone else. Dr. Ronald Foster joined the partnership group a little over 3 years ago to take over our former physician's family practice. The local hospital was giving him a hard time because of his age, and the partners in the group he was a part of had effectively forced him to retire. Emma was a registered nurse and got her license while working at Southeast Hospital before moving to a nursing home. Southeast Hospital, a teaching hospital, wanted to look more youthful, and if our former family doctor wasn't going to self-medicate or go on a diet to achieve that look, it was time for him to go. It's sad when a medical organization puts science and image ahead of time and experience. For the next 6 weeks, I worked a 6 to 6 evening schedule, 4 days on and 4 days off. It was time to get the help I needed. If something was going on, my work schedule gave them the perfect opportunity to do whatever they wanted without being caught. My loving wife created enough doubt with her behavior that I took a step I thought I would never have to take. Before taking the smoked meats out to the grill, I sent a text message to one of the team members I regularly worked with asking them to call me in 5 minutes. I was standing next to my wife when he called. Before answering, I told my wife that since it was work-related, I was going to go outside for some alone time. After answering him, I asked him to wait and left the backyard. Truth be told, I only did this because I didn't want Emma to hear this conversation. Bob, do you remember the team we put together when we had to find out for Glenn what was going on with his ex-wife a couple years ago? I asked. Of course I remember, Damon. It worked very well and didn't take long. Bob replied. Who needs our help this time? Me. From what I've learned, I believe this has been going on for at least the last 3 months. Emma and the man I think she's involved with is Dr. Ronald Foster, I said. Even her colleagues at the nursing home think something is going on. I know because I just overheard one of the supervisors talking to her about it. There has to be a serious relationship for this to be talked about. Whatever is going on, the head of HR told Emma to tone it down when they were together at her job. If it's been said, then it's been going on for a while. I'll start calling and try to arrange for us to meet at the fire station tomorrow when we're at work. Bob said, Our friends at the sheriff's department would love it if we offered them something out of the ordinary. Remember, Damon, we'll have to set the same rules for you as we did for Glenn. When we devised a plan to help Glenn after we found out what he knew, we made one rule. He was not to interfere until the team was finished. We felt that any change in his behavior might cause his spouse to change what she was doing. It took us less than a month to finish the job. When we finished the work, he was presented with detailed information about everything his now ex-wife and mistress was doing. The lawyer said it was so detailed that not even a worm could have slipped through it. Glenn won the divorce, gaining primary custody of their 3 children. We met that Monday night, right after dinner, in the meeting room at the firehouse. 6 members of the sheriff's department, 5 firefighters, and 2 police officers were present. I told them all that had happened on Friday and what I had learned since then. Everyone agreed that something was definitely going on. I gave them a description of my wife's car, her license plate number, and her usual hours of operation. She worked 8 hours a day, starting at 7 in the morning and ending at 3:30 in the afternoon. They asked me to get copies of our medical records for the past 2 years from a file cabinet kept at our home. They wanted to make sure that Dr. Ronald Foster was still our family doctor by reviewing the medical billing records. If they had a romantic relationship, he was to assign us to another doctor from their limited partnership practice. I was then asked to leave the room so they could plan who would do what and when. On Tuesday morning, after walking my daughter to the bus, I saw my retired neighbor getting the morning paper. I went over to say hello. We got to talking and he asked why the doctor had stopped by last night. Are you sure it was a doctor? He said he was still wearing his white overcoat when he got out of the car. I saw him take it off and leave it in the car before he came to your door. Your wife had opened the front door and was waiting for him. He was still in the house when I went to bed around 10 o'clock, he said. I hope it's nothing serious. I replied that I didn't know why, but would ask my wife about it when she got home. As I approached the house, I realized that my fears were correct. Grabbing my cell phone, I walked over to my neighbor and showed him a picture of Dr. Ronald Foster from the medical group's Facebook page. He said it was the same doctor he had been seeing. Emma called and said she would be late. I ended up taking Evie, our daughter, to my mother's house so I could get to work on time. I told Bob what the neighbor had said and gave him copies of our medical records and certificates from the health insurance company. They proved that Dr. Ronald Foster was still our family doctor. The last time my wife had been to see him was 2 weeks ago. The following Tuesday, while my wife was working, some boys came in and did something around the house. I was not allowed to go into the house until they were finished. So I sat and chatted with my neighbor about this and that. My neighbor said that the doctor's visit last week wasn't a medical visit, was it? I told him he was a smart man. He said, your friends are doing the wiring in the house. I said they are, but they are doing it without me. It was done so I wouldn't know where anything was. If I had known what they were doing, I would have watched to see if they were working, just like anyone else, and maybe my change in behavior would have given them away. I wish I had friends like you, said a neighbor when I was going through a divorce years ago. It could have saved me thousands of dollars in legal fees alone. These days, you have to do everything you can to protect your ass, even from those you trust. The sad thing is that the new computer age has really helped destroy the few family values we had. On the first day of the last 4-day run, ending 6 weeks of nights, they came to the firehouse to give me the bad news. They even brought along one of the best divorce attorneys in our town. I immediately realized that there was more to my situation than just my wife fooling around. The fact that they chose an attorney for me meant that the team felt that we had to act very quickly. Emma and Ronald Foster were lovers. Their affair had been going on for over 6 months. It was reaching a breaking point. They felt it was time to take some bold steps. Emma was waiting until the end of the school year to file for divorce, which was only 2 months away. On the nights I worked, they would either stay at my house after Evie went to bed, or Emma would take our daughter to her sister's so they could babysit. Emma, after spending the night with Ronald at his house, would pick Evie up to bring her home before I left. Then they would get together as usual. The reason the lawyer was there was because of what was being done behind my back. Emma, with the help of Dr. Ronald Foster, was planning to use mental cruelty grounds against me. They wanted to prove that I was an unfit father and a danger to my daughter's well-being. Emma believed, because of her profession, that false accusations, backed by the recorded medical history they were creating, would be sufficient for the court to award her sole custody of our daughter. She wanted me to have limited contact with Evie, visiting her only under supervision. Her ultimate goal was to anger me and my parents to the point where we decided to walk out of their lives forever. As I sat and listened to them, I wondered what I had done to my future ex to make her so dirty and vindictive. The 60-page report had dates, pictures, pretty explosive ones of the two of them doing it. Several notarized statements claiming their relationship had lasted at least 6 months. There were even transcripts of conversations between the two of them as they worked out plans together on how to destroy me. I decided that after my last night shift this week, she would be served. We will also file a complaint with the state medical board against Dr. Ronald Foster and get it the same day. We will attach evidence that he was still serving as our family doctor during this time, according to our bills. We raised the issue that since they talked as a couple about setting me up, could he have falsified my wife's information and my medical records to support my soon-to-be ex's claims of mental cruelty? A copy of the divorce petition would be given to the local child services office with an explanation that I was taking my daughter out of town so they could investigate me and my wife without my intervention. The letter explained that we were doing this as a preventative measure. I was to take a 3-week vacation as soon as my work shift ended this week. They suggested I take my daughter out of town. The vacation had already been approved. One of the firefighters on our crew was one of the department heads. In their presence, I called my retired parents and offered to use my dad's van and go on a 3-week vacation the day I finished my last shift. I told them I needed them to do it, and I would pay the expenses. They agreed, but wanted to know why we had to do it in a hurry. I said I would explain it to them when we hit the road. My newly hired attorney was shocked when I offered to sign over parental rights to my parents until the divorce was finalized. He said it was a brilliant move under the circumstances. If Emma has already filed a complaint with child services, it shows that you care about the child's needs first. Unless we clear my name, it will show all concerned, even the legal ones, that I am protecting my daughter and putting her needs first. I will prepare the papers, he said, but be sure to have them notarized within 24 hours after we serve your wife. I had just finished my last evening shift and returned home in time to see my wife off to work. As usual, she kissed me on the cheek on her way out the door. As soon as she pulled away from the driveway, I made a quick phone call. Evie and I started packing clothes for the unexpected trip. One of the representatives from the sheriff's department, at my request, informed the principal of the school what was going on and why I had to pick up our 6-year-old daughter from school. At 8 o'clock in the morning, my parents drove up. We loaded and packed our belongings into the van and then hit the road, and by 9, we were on the road. Out of respect, I called Oliva to let her know what was going on. She told me that while the two of them were in the nursing home, things were strictly professional after talking to Emma. The rumors began to subside. I explained that I now had proof that their affair had lasted at least 6 months. As a result, I would have to serve her tonight while she was at work. Oliva said she would be a witness and let me know how it went. I then joined my daughter in my parents' huge van. As we drove out of town, I handed my mother a legal envelope with all the details. Asked her to read the whole thing. My father asked what was going on. I recently found out that Emma was planning to divorce me at the end of the school year, I explained. What Mom is reading is what we found out and were able to prove. Her lover is our family doctor, and they were going to make me look really bad. If they hadn't been caught, they would have set it up so that by the time we got through the court system, I'd never be able to see Evie again. So we're leaving town because it's going to get very explosive for a few people in the next few days, my father said. And it's best if you and our granddaughter aren't around. Let's do this. Emma will be attended to while she's at work today. This morning, the state medical board received a formal complaint about Dr. Ronald's relationship with one of his patients. This lady is my wife. I'm filing a charge of possible ethical misconduct. It will involve a very rough picture. Children's Services gets its own notification of everything that goes on, along with what the moms read. He will lose his license to practice for at least a year or more if he is found guilty. His behavior will bring all the doctors in his group under deep investigation if your allegation is true, said Dad. Oh my God. Mom said. They let my granddaughter witness them doing this. I'm going to kill that bitch myself. That doctor can kiss his ass goodbye. He's permanently disbarred. The partnership he's in, all government agencies will be scrutinized with extreme scrutiny, my father said. There are a couple of idiots who hung themselves. Emma will be lucky to get supervised visits. Damon Lay, you and Evie will move in with us when we get back, said my mom. If Emma comes to me when your father and you aren't home, I'll open the door with a loaded double-barreled shotgun. No more school bus. I'll drive Evie to school and pick her up every day. God, I loved my mom. She loved her only granddaughter more than anything. My mom was very protective of her family. When she was growing up, more than once she fought off those who she thought wanted to hurt her family. My dad drove the car until we needed to get gas. That meant the gasoline level was down to half. I used my credit card to get gas and then got behind the wheel. This gave my dad a chance to read everything for himself. He couldn't believe how detailed it was. I ended up having to tell him about the group we had set up in city services. I said this was the second divorce we were working on to protect one of our own. Around 3 o'clock, we stopped at a trailer park for the night my mom had booked. These 3 weeks were designed by her to spoil her granddaughter. After we parked and hooked up to electricity, I took Evie and went swimming in their pond. We were just getting back when my cell phone rang. It was Eliva. Hi, Eliva, I said. Hope your day went well. Damon, we haven't had such an exciting day in months. Eliva replied, Thanks to you. We received word this afternoon that Dr. Ronald Foster has been suspended from professional practice until the state medical board completes its investigation. They're acting so fast I'm amazed, I said honestly. I figured they'd at least call him in for an interview first. They only suspend if there's a serious complaint that's already partially proven, Eliva explained. It also means that they consider the situation to be very serious. That means it will be about 3 months before we know the outcome. Well, I sent them all the information I had listed on my divorce petition, I explained. At 3 in the afternoon, your soon-to-be ex got a summons, right during his shift. I alerted security to expect him and contacted me before letting him in. When he arrived, I escorted him to the section where Emma worked. The young man asked her if you were Emma Lee and when she said yes. He said, Congratulations, you have been served, Eliva said. When she opened the envelope, the first thing we all saw was a picture of Ronald making love to Evie. Oh no, she screamed before she passed out. Damn, my lawyer let her see it first, said I with a laugh. That's a credit to her. Did the state get a copy of that picture? Asked Olive. Probably the same way if I know my lawyer, said I honestly. Then the state really had no choice. Dr. Ronald Foster was having an affair with a patient, said Oliva. I didn't believe you could do it. We have an office pool now for how long he'll lose his license. My father thinks he's lost it for good as far as our state is concerned, I said. Emma and Ronald, we found out, created a false medical history that I was mentally abusive to her so she could get sole custody. If that can be proven, criminal charges will likely be filed. It's a mess, but her problems are compounded because now everyone knows she let her daughter see what she was doing to Ronald, Oliva said. The rumor mill is now running like a rabbit here. Some staff members refuse to work with her. I'm working on rearranging the schedule now. They say they've lost all ability to trust her. When she came to, I informed her that the state had informed us that Dr. Ronald Foster had been suspended by the medical board pending an investigation. When she left at 3:30, she wasn't happy. Wait until she finds out Evie and I are out of town. We left with my parents this morning on the advice of my lawyer. My lawyer decided that because of the accusations against me by Ronald and Emma, it would be best if I wasn't alone with my daughter at this time. A smart move, since she has many friends all over the world thanks to her profession. To give herself the necessary credibility to her claims, these stories may have already been planted, said Oliva. In the end, it was the details in our reports that saved our organization's ass more than once from a legal standpoint. We promised to keep in touch and said goodbye. Mom and Dad looked at me in utter fascination. It was as if they realized for the first time what Emma and Dr. Foster were trying to accomplish. Mom, find in your notebook the address of the nearest notary we'll have tomorrow morning, I said. Why? She asked. The lawyer has drawn up legal documents giving you both my parental rights until either the divorce is settled or my name is cleared. We have to have them signed and notarized by 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, I said. I won't let them take my daughter away from us, no matter what happens. My mother tearfully asked, Are you sure about that? Does that seem a little extreme? Yes, Mom, I'm sure. Even the lawyer thinks it's for the best. We don't know what the fake medical reports say. As a result, until it can be proven that I am not a danger to my own child, for Evie's protection, we are going along with this. I explained. My mother began to cry. Upon arriving home, Emma Lee found her husband's car in the driveway. She shut off the car and prepared for the expected storm. She walked over and rang the doorbell, hoping he would answer. But he didn't come, so she rang again. Finally, she took the house key and unlocked the door. As soon as she entered the house, she realized that no one was home because her daughter had not come running to greet her. Pulling an envelope of legal documents out of a huge bag, she began to read it all the way through. It was clear that whoever had used his services, they had caught it all. Ronald and her own deciphered words laid out their plan. He struck first, and he struck hard. The problem was that none of the altered medical records had been made public simply because they hadn't reached that stage in their plans yet. And now, they wouldn't be. Ronald couldn't access his files until the investigation was over. Ronald never learned the details of the complaint against him. He was only told that because of the seriousness of the complaint, they were taking precautionary measures. Damon proved that the case and their stupidity had nothing to do with it. No moral person would accept that a 6-year-old girl witnessed them making love. Until now, she hadn't even realized it had happened. Evie must have woken up and then gone straight to bed. Getting sole custody was now impossible. But joint custody with the main one was still possible. The main thing was to get to Damon and talk to him. Damon always listened to her opinion. She called him, but his phone went to voicemail. She texted him and got no response. She called his parents and found they didn't answer their home phone. She called their cell phone and did not get through to the answering machine. It became clear that they had blocked her. She called her sister, who answered. Hi, Emma. Damon did the smart thing. Everyone in the family was sent a copy of his divorce petition, Evelyn said. Mom and Dad are furious. They've read the whole thing and are utterly disgusted by the behavior of you and your lover. In our parents' eyes, you've gone too far in trying to ruin Damon's reputation, said her sister. He called them this morning right after you left for work to tell them he was taking their granddaughter out of town to his parents' house. When they asked him why, he replied, Your daughter and her lover left me no choice. You will receive a document that will explain why. Dad, Damon said, Emma has put me in a legal situation where I have to relinquish my parental rights to Evie until I clear my name. My mom and dad will take that responsibility. Our mom and dad got hysterical when they read the paperwork. Why the hell are you trying to ruin Demon's life? God damn it, Emma said. Does this mean I'm going to have to fight my relatives for custody? Looks like it, Evelyn said. The divorce court can't rule on what he doesn't have. I think he outsmarted you. I told you he was the kindest and most compassionate man I knew until he was crossed. Then he took a scorched earth approach to everything. You know your mother-in-law's reputation. This is one fight that will drag on for a long time. I expected a fight, but I didn't expect this, Emma stated. I thought I had created a winning hand for myself. We were all sent what you received. As the cover letter said, it was a certified copy of the divorce petition. A certified copy was also sent to the state medical board, Evelyn explained. You and your lover Ronald have been trying to destroy him in order to cut his daughter Evie out of your lives. If you were in that situation, what would you do? Shit, said Emma. He's making an attempt on my boyfriend's career and our future. Ronald, if the board decides in Damon's favor, may never be able to practice medicine in the state again. Bingo. Sis, I think you've made your point, Evelyn said. He's giving you what you plan to do to him and using your own scheming to prove it. But that's okay, because according to you, Ronald is the best you've ever had. As for the family, and I have to agree with them, you are on your own in that matter. None of us want any part of it. We will have no part in your attempt to ruin your husband's life. Stay away from us until this mess is sorted out. Emma was stunned that her husband had completely outplayed her. Even her family wanted nothing to do with the mess she had made for herself. When she was served with the application, she was in complete shock. Ronald and she thought she had been so careful. She spent the rest of the night trying to figure out how she got caught. Ronald Foster was just finishing up a meeting with his partners. After 4 hours of heated discussion, they had all agreed to buy him out immediately. This was to minimize the impact of the investigation on the limited partnership. Until they knew who had made the serious allegations, everyone would be flying blind. Ronald Foster had earned enough from the deal to open his own office once things settled down. Emma's cell phone buzzed. She had a text message. She swiped it to open it. Damon replied to the message. It read, "Can't talk. Too much rage. Any communication will be in the presence of or through lawyers." Emma cried because she realized she had lost her chance to convince him to withdraw the complaint against their doctor. My parents and I had just walked out of the notary's office, having finalized the transfer of my parental rights to them. I had to pay another $5 for them to scan a copy and send it to my attorney. When I got an unexpected phone call from my family doctor's office, I answered it. The state representatives were there, and they had failed to include my name in the medical records in the court order they received. The nurse I spoke with asked for my consent to release the records to them. I gave it and asked if they would get my wife and my billing records. She replied that anything that pertains to your family. My mom planned our trip well, picking up something every day to entertain Evie. It brought back memories of those special times when we were kids. We parked early again. The humidity wasn't too high, and I joined my dad in cooking dinner on the outdoor grill. Mom poked her head out and said, "Oliva is calling your cell phone." I walked over and took the cell phone from her hands. "Hi, Oliva," I said. "I'm a little surprised to hear from you so soon." "Thanks to you, we had another interesting day," Oliva said, with a slight chuckle in her voice. Emma spent about an hour interviewing with the state representatives this afternoon. They utilized the services of our in-house notary to record, witness, and certify her testimony. "That's really interesting," I said. "Anything else I should know about?" When the meeting was over, she told me that she would have to appear before the Board of Nursing for a full vetting. She was called in because of her behavior, Oliva said. She will most likely end up being placed on 6 months probation. "How will that affect her job?" I asked. "Since what they were doing wasn't happening at this location, not much." Oliva said, "That means I'll have to keep an eye on her and report anything questionable. For the next 6 months, Emma will have the best daily reports on our patients in the entire organization. But if she gets probation, We'll put her on the graveyard shift for the entire time. I started laughing. Emma hated graveyards because they killed social life. I explained that my parents and I were trying to make this time special for Evie. We talked for a few minutes, and I promised to take her out to dinner when I got back. While we were eating dinner, my mom asked me what I knew about Olive. I replied that I didn't know much. She's a single mom about my age, and she has a son who is about a year older than Evie. I don't even know if she was married or not. Oliva and I kept in touch the entire time we were away. The day before we returned, I called the lawyer to ask him to give me access to the house so I could get my things. That's when I found out that Emma had moved out of the house, taking everything she wanted. She was now living with Ronald. We got back a couple days early, so I had time to do some necessary things. So on Friday morning, we loaded up again in the Cape. When I told my parents about it, they thought it was ridiculous. As a result, they dropped me off at the house early in the morning. Taking little Evie with them, they set off to our new home. The first thing I did was mow the lawn. No sooner had I finished than a neighbor came in with a cold beer. The only thing he could say was that it was a well-played move. Your marriage breakup was reported on the local news. I called a locksmith to come and rekey all the locks. I spent the afternoon cleaning up the mess Emma had left behind. I called my mom and asked if she needed to pick up anything from the house. She said no, just the rest of your and Evie's clothes. What was left, I decided to sell along with the house. I loaded up all the leftover canned and frozen food and took it to the food bank. Then I went back to clean out the refrigerator. I took the stuff home, and my mom made me leave all my clothes in the laundry room. She wanted all the clothes washed before we started using them, in case something was done to them. It was now about 4 in the afternoon, and I picked up my cell phone. Olive picked up on the first ring. "Hey, Damon, you're back," Oliva said. "When did you get back?" "This morning. I've been tidying up the house all day to get it ready to sell," I said. "I was wondering if you and your son would like to have dinner with me and Emma." "If he was home, we'd love to, but he's with my mom this weekend and I'm free," Oliva said. "Okay, then I'll leave Evie with my mom and pick you up at 7. Where would you rather go, Outback or Red Lobster?" "Red Lobster sounds great," she replied. I dressed up a little for dinner. I put on a shirt, pants, and leather shoes. Since I had made reservations, we were immediately escorted inside. We had a good dinner, and I learned a lot about her. She had never been married and was basically raising her 7-year-old son alone. Her father had been a firefighter at one time. My first day of work was to be on Sunday. The state had not yet made a decision about Emma and Ronald. The general consensus was that the longer this went on, the worse it would get. I told her about what we had been doing as a family with Evie for 3 weeks. After that, we went for a walk around downtown Cape to check out the nightlife. It was about 11 o'clock when I pulled up to my parents' house. Mom, being mom, was still waiting for me. Sunday afternoon, I was called into work. I had a visitor who wanted to talk to me. I figured I knew who it was. And I was right. It was my ex, Emma Lee. "Mrs. Foster, how can I help you?" I said, as I walked into the office and turned on the recorder app on my cell phone. "My name is still Lee, Damon," Emma replied. "Well, if that's true, then I'm still a piece of shit to you." I replied, "So what do you want?" "Damon, that's not true," Emma said, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm sorry, but that's not what your behavior is indicative of, is it?" I replied. "The first thing you did was move into another apartment as soon as Evie and I went on vacation. Witnesses say you moved in the next day. So much for guilt or remorse." "I want to see Evie," Emma said. "See your lawyer. I'm sure he'll confirm that legally I no longer have a say." "It sounds like you're knocking on the wrong door," I replied. "After all, I was the one you publicly stated to that I was abusing our child." "I know that, but you can smooth things over," Emma said. "I'm sorry, but I really don't think that at her age, Evie should be introduced to someone who is nothing but a slut." I said, "The pictures show how much you care for our daughter when you are in the arms of another. You can deal with my parents directly." So please leave, Mrs. Foster, and don't come back or I will file for a restraining order. With those words, I turned my back and walked out. I told the man assigned to this position for the day to escort the whore out. I turned off the app and clicked save. He later told me that her face turned white, and when he walked her to her car, she broke down. According to him, I told her that from what I had heard about all of this, Damon had no choice but to behave this way. After all, if you felt any responsibility over the last 4 weeks, you would have done something to clear his name. Most of us who helped him investigate what was going on find your behavior inexcusable. You are nothing but a conniving, greedy bitch who planned to take away everything that meant anything to him. Late Monday night, I was working with an ambulance crew on a medical call when my mother called. I transferred the call to an answering machine. We were helping prepare an elderly woman for transportation to the hospital. Back at the station, I called her back. "Sorry, Mom, I was on a call and couldn't answer," I explained. "I thought you should know that the state representatives were here right after I brought Evie home. They talked to her right at school today," she said. "They toured the house, checked her room. I showed them the transfer of parental rights document, and we talked to me a little bit about it. I told them that I have never seen my son be violent to anyone." "Thanks, Mom. That's good to hear," I said. "I hope you're not mad, but Emma's parents are here and staying for dinner," she said. "Do you want us to wait for you?" "That's okay, Mom. Please tell them I said hi and tell them I'll be there as soon as I can," I replied. "Tell them they can take Evie whenever they want, as long as Emma isn't present. Explain that this will be the case until the court settles everything." I ended up staying late because one of the men working the evening shift was able to get in before 8, and I stayed so we wouldn't be short-staffed. I told him he could compensate me for those hours later. I texted my mother not to wait and explained why. I was just getting into my Ford Escape and heading home when I got a call from Emma's dad. "Hey, Dad, how was dinner?" I said. "Great, both me and my wife enjoyed it," Dad said. "Damon, my wife and I want to thank you. Gracie told us what you told her. We are very sorry for what our daughter did. We promise you, son, to honor your terms. Have you spoken to her at all? We haven't spoken since we got a copy of the divorce petition. She came to the station on Sunday and demanded that I let her see Evie. I told her it was out of my hands and that she would have to take the matter up with my mother." "Shit, I just remembered I recorded our conversation. How about I send it to you?" I said. "Please write it down. I'd love to hear it," said my other dad. I did. Apparently he liked it because he forwarded it to my parents, all of his kids, including Emma, and then sent back a message saying, "The truth was well explained." It's a good thing I live in flyover country, because the next day I learned that my wife and I had an appointment with Judge Donald McDonald for Friday at 1 p.m. The toughest and most principled judge this area has ever known. You had the right to be a bigot or an asshole in his court, but if you did, he treated you accordingly. Bottom line, if you were a man, it meant your balls were hung out to dry. It was rumored, but not proven, that some of them never got them back. The man was a living legend around here. It was often said that he made Judge Roy Bean look weak. My lawyer said that when the judge took our case, it would be like the comedy Friday the 13th. You had to watch your R's and Q's and be ready to answer his questions when he was ready, or suffer the consequences. The judge will not tolerate slander and innuendo. He wants facts. It is by knowing them that we will present our defense. We all gathered at one point as the judge took a seat on the bench. Emma's attorney wanted visitation rights with Evie. To accomplish this, he needed to get the termination of my parental rights revoked. My lawyer pointed out that I had voluntarily relinquished my parental rights to my parents because of the accusations made by my wife and her lover. Damon Lay swallowed his pride and put his daughter Evie's needs first. He has not been alone with his child since he found out about the allegations made against him because of the situation his wife put him in. We recorded the conversation we witnessed. Damon explained that Emma Lee would have to address the issue with those who have parental rights, which are his parents. The judge asked to hear the conversation, so my attorney took my phone and we turned on the recording through the microphone sound system. Everyone could hear it. Emma was not impressed that she had to listen to it all over again. My lawyer then presented a notarized statement from the witness, who told the rest of the story after I left. The judge asked to see the transfer of parental rights document, and my attorney handed him a copy. A slight smile came off his lips as he read it. Turning to my wife's attorney, he pronounced, "Is it true that it was because his ex-wife accused him of mental cruelty that he did what he thought he had to do?" My wife's attorney replied, "Yes, but she was under a lot of emotional pressure at the time. Now that she is out of the relationship, she has regained her equilibrium." "Is the case being investigated as it was explained to me?" "Yes, it is being investigated, but there is no decision or ruling yet," my wife's lawyer said. "I'm going to read what the termination of parental rights document says." The judge said, "I voluntarily relinquish my parental rights until the issues regarding my parenting skills are resolved by the state agencies that are investigating or until the court rules after receiving evidence that I am not an abuser." There are 2 agencies currently investigating, correct? There are 3, the State Medical Board, Children's Services, and the State Board of Nursing, my attorney explained. "Brilliant! It's just one big mess." "How long have these investigations been going on?" asked Judge McDonald. "About a month," my attorney replied. "Judging by the length of the investigation, it's not just the typical he said, she said problem." "Is it?" the judge asked. On page 32, the second and third paragraphs of Damon Lee's divorce petition explain why the 3 commissions are still looking into this case, my attorney said. We all watched as the judge pulled it out of the folder and read it. His face took on a serious expression. He set the papers aside, looked at my wife's attorney. "Let me make it clear that a divorce cannot be granted until all 3 investigations are complete. I will not interfere with an investigation that could lead to criminal charges. From what I have read, it appears that one of the parties in this situation is here because of the possible criminal actions of the others. I have to take that possibility into consideration. It may be that the complaints about one party by the other party are false," Judge Donald McDonald said. "The termination of Mr. Damon Lee's parental rights stands. I want to acknowledge the wisdom he demonstrates to the court by his action. It takes a special type of parent to put the needs of a child first. He did so to protect both the child and himself. The behavior of both biological parents towards the child came into question because of the behavior of one of them. He found it best to remove himself from the equation. So I have to agree that until we see the reports from the state, no final decisions can be made." Mrs. Emma Lee's suit for visitation must be brought against the child's other legal guardian, which he is not. "Court is dismissed," said the judge. The expression on Emma's face spoke for itself. She didn't like the fact that what I had done was deemed legal. Emma was furious because she hated to lose. As we were leaving the courtroom, she approached me. "Damon, how did you guess?" asked Emma. I replied, "It was just a bunch of little things that didn't add up between Evie's accident and the barbecue at Olive's. Remember the phone call I got that Sunday?" Emma asked, "Yes, why?" "It wasn't long before I realized that your behavior was the same as in high school when you were interested in someone else," I said. "That call to me was in response to a text I had sent a few minutes earlier. By the time it was over, you were already under investigation." Her face went completely white. It hadn't occurred to her that she'd given herself away. Up to this point, she had thought someone had told her. "If you follow the little things, the whole story eventually emerges from them," I said with a smile. "Considering how detailed you are about your patients, you should have known that." I didn't need to tell her that, but I really enjoyed getting to the bottom of it. It made her even angrier because I had the biggest grin on my face. As I walked out of the courtroom, I slipped into the men's restroom and ran into the judge. I thanked the judge for his decision. "It was a pleasure," Judge McDonald said. "When I read the facts, everything was so black and white. One question, was it your lawyer who suggested you do this?" "No, it was me," I said. Knowing my wife, I realized she would do or say anything to make my situation worse. I saw that I had driven myself into a frame of reference that she felt she could control. A friend told me that because of her profession, She knew many influential people who could affect the outcome of the situation. I did it to remove myself from that state in the only way available to me. If you hadn't done that, she would have not only gotten not only visitation rights, but also custody rights because of the seriousness of the allegations against you, the judge said frankly. Your preemptive strike put an end to all of this. I hope your name is cleared soon. So do I. On Saturday night, there was a back to the 60s style dance at the fairgrounds in one of the fair buildings. I had a couple tickets. I called Olive and asked if she wanted to go. She said she'd love to, but she was having dinner with her parents first. Would you and Evie like to go? I said yes. It was interesting. It had been a long time since I'd gotten a kick out of my overprotective father. Evie and Olive's son Terry got along well. Olive's dad seemed a bit of a bore to her. I think she noticed that because I heard her tell her father to back off. I know Damon is a good, honest man, Olive said. How the hell would you know what kind of man he is? He growled back. His ex-wife accused him of all the things everyone whispers about behind his back. Dad, Oliva said, he works at the number 3 precinct. He thought for a second, then smiled and said, Oh shit, why didn't you tell me that? He humbly extended his hand and said that firefighters need a certain type of person to work as a firefighter. Now I know that everything they tell you about you is bullshit. You are always welcome here. They offered to keep Evie overnight, but I explained that she had to be at a relative's house for the rest of the weekend. So I had to explain the whole situation. The dance went well. There is nothing more enjoyable than dancing to old songs like Twist and Shout, all the Beach Boys songs, and early rock and roll. Some of the doo-wop songs were her favorites because her mother played them when she was growing up. I walked her to the door. When we said goodnight to each other, she leaned over and kissed me. Damon, I know it's too soon, but I was wondering when you'd be ready. She said this before saying goodnight to me. It was a little over 2 in the morning when I walked into my parents' house. My mom was waiting for me again. We talked about the night before and how much I enjoyed it before I went to bed. The lawyers were in the process of dividing up the property, and we put the house up for sale. It was slow going. It had been 3 months since the breakup, and finally there was a breakthrough. The state medical board found Dr. Ronald Foster guilty of several ethics violations. Chief among them was altering medical records for personal gain. His attempt to ruin a man's life to take his wife was taken very seriously. His license to practice medicine in the state was permanently taken away from him. Oliva called when she heard the news, waking me from sleep. I went back into the night and slept for about 2 hours. As a result, I was over the moon and too excited to go back to sleep. My mom was thrilled to death when I broke the news to her and my dad. When I came out to them dressed, my mom asked me what was wrong. I replied that I was going to see if the lady who had been standing next to me for the past few months wanted to go to lunch. Mom smiled and replied that it wasn't time for us to meet Olive. It was about 12 when I walked into the Chateau nursing home in Cape. I was dressed semi-formally. The first person I saw was the receptionist who had lied to me months ago. Her face turned white as I approached the counter at the main entrance. Could you please contact Oliva Jones and let her know that there is a gentleman here who would like to know if it would be okay to have lunch with him? I asked. I watched as she picked up the phone, dialing Oliva's number. A few minutes later, Oliva appeared with a huge smile. After greeting her, I pulled her to me and kissed her forehead. Then, hand in hand, we walked outside. We went to Logan's Roadhouse restaurant for lunch. You know we're the center of attention for all the gossip columnists now, Oliva said. Emma already found out about it from the gossip queen, the receptionist. That's her problem. Now that I've been vindicated, I'm not going to look back, I replied. Besides, my new girlfriend is probably tired of waiting for me to get off my ass. I must have said something right, because Olive's eyes got kind of watery, and her 1-hour lunch turned into 2.5. I found out later that after I drove Oliva back, the receptionist informed Emma how happy and in love we both looked. Emma was about to find out that there was trouble brewing in her paradise. The local CBS station reported it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It turned out that Dr. Ronald Foster and Emma Lee had conspired to destroy me by falsifying medical records. That same week, the Board of Nursing placed Emma on probation for 1 year. Oliva transferred Emma to the cemeteries, as she should. Emma and Ronald's relationship became unstable. It didn't help that she found out she was pregnant. Ronald began to look around to see if he had any other options. Quickly finding out there were none, he took a job as an orderly at the Lutheran Home for Veterans, working the graveyard shift. It was the last night shift of a 4-day stretch when I arrived at the station and saw a congratulatory banner hanging there. They called someone to fill in for me. Oliva, her son and parents were there along with our captain. My parents and my daughter were there too. I had just been promoted. I found out that he was detained because of what I had been through. That meant no more shifts for me. I now had a junior manager position, a 5-day, 8-hour workday with weekends off. During a party, I overheard Bill Jones tell the captain that if fate favored him, he would soon be my father-in-law. It was about 2 more weeks before we made it to Judge McDonald's office again. The terms of the settlement agreement were approved, and I was granted a divorce on the grounds of adultery. One night, Ronald Foster disappeared, leaving Emma alone and pregnant. It was Labor Day weekend, and I took Olive for a walk to one of the local state parks an hour before dusk. I had one small thing to do. It required getting down on one knee. Of course, she agreed. Our families got together and planned a barbecue Monday afternoon at Oliva's house, so I had just finished making the franks I liked. When Oliva's mother, Odessa, saw the engagement ring and rushed into my arms. I was busy giving them. "When were you going to tell me?" asked Odessa to her daughter. "After we finish eating," Olive replied, grinning widely. Bill saw his wife's eyes and said loudly to her, "What's wrong?" Everyone froze because he had all of our attention. "Nothing Oliva and Damon got engaged and are getting married," Odessa said. We got married the week before Halloween. Emma is now allowed to see Evie when she's with her parents. No one knows that Mom, Dad, and I have legally regained parental rights. Emma has to live with the fact that one of her bosses is now her ex-husband's wife. She's not a very happy person. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.